Trump stooping to an ugly new low, even for him. He's making a claim that will be heard the world over, reviving an old and familiar and rather tired tactic of accusing a perceived political enemy of treason. Only this time, the subject was his first-term predecessor, former President Barack Obama.
The leader of the gang was President Obama. He's guilty. It's not a question. I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election.
He made that baseless, unsubstantiated, rather ludicrous accusation today in the Oval Office. It follows baseless, unsubstantiated claims from his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard said that President Obama's officials engaged in a, quote, seditious conspiracy and hid evidence that Russia did not interfere in the 2016 election. Donald Trump's claims today, an accusation of a crime that is punishable by death, so outrageous that they drew this rare rebuke from President Barack Obama's office. It reads, quote, out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response. But these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in a 2020 report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, led by then Chairman Marco Rubio. The very same Marco Rubio, little Marco to Donald, who currently serves as Trump's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. His report concluded that Russia conducted an influence campaign in 2016 to do this, quote, harm the Clinton campaign, tarnish an expected Clinton presidential administration, help the Trump campaign after Trump became the presumptive Republican nominee, and undermine the U.S. democratic process. That conclusion was further bolstered earlier this month when Donald Trump's current CIA director, a man named John Ratcliffe, released a review that, as NBC News points out, quote, did not refute the findings of the intelligence assessment that Russia sought to interfere in the election. Now, as for these wild and erratic and unfounded attempts by Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump to rewrite their own version of history and provide a distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein debacle that has completely engulfed Donald Trump and his White House, they are claiming that the Obama administration concealed evidence that Russia did not try to manipulate votes. But that's Orwellian doublespeak. It's not what Obama's officials ever claimed in the first instance. It was always about an influence campaign. Here was President Obama explaining it on December 16th, 2016.
I can assure the public that there was not the kind of tampering with the voting process that was of concern and will continue to be of concern going forward, that the votes that were cast were counted. They were counted appropriately. We have not seen evidence of machines being tampered with. So that assurance I can provide.
That is where we start the hour with Ranking Member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Also joining us, staff writer at The Atlantic and a contributor to The Atlantic Daily Newsletter, Tom Nichols is here. And former DHS Chief of Staff during Trump's first term, Miles Taylor, is back with us. Congressman, let me start with you, and let me show you one more piece of sound. This is Tulsi Gabbard echoing the very same thing that President Obama says in that tape I just played to Joe Rogan.
When you're talking about like these Russian troll farms that you mentioned, what is missing from all of the news coverage around this and all of the outrage about how this foreign country is trying to influence our elections, which is wrong and which the American people need to be aware of, where this information is coming from, is the fact that and you're saying, why does somebody do that? Well, because this country does want to influence who we're electing, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, we'd rather work with this person. We know that person is not going to be nice to us.
Congressman, your thoughts on this Rubicon crossing news cycle?
Well, that's a very different Tulsi Gabbard. That was Tulsi Gabbard before she was in the employ of Donald Trump and before she saw a political route to power and influence. And now, of course, we have a radically different Tulsi Gabbard. You didn't play, by the way, any sound of then Senator Marco Rubio, chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, who wrote and got a unanimous vote from Democrats and Republicans of an investigation of the Russian attack on the election, which, just as you have been saying, and just as you played Obama saying, did not involve technical messing around with voting equipment, but did involve hacking the DNC and releasing emails. It did involve buying social media ads in the service of something that Marco Rubio's report said, which is that the Russians tampered with the election, not through the technical means, in the service of Donald Trump. But of course, now that Marco Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard are working for Donald Trump, reality has been inverted. And what troubles me most about this, Nicole, is that I'm standing in a spot that on January 6, 2021 was overrun by a violent mob intent on hanging the vice president and killing people like me. And it was all driven by a lie propagated by Donald Trump. And now we're seeing that playbook again. And my only question is, when people like Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump accuse an ex-president of a capital crime that is punishable by death, who is going to die? Who is going to die because they've decided that they need a distraction away from the Epstein calamity, which they brought upon themselves?
Well, I mean, it's a dark place that we find ourselves in. And I think that Trump has led all of us to the underbelly of his movement's deepest passions by botching the Epstein file release that he promised his base so badly that we're all down in the rabbit hole with him, trying to understand how conspiracies drive his voters' passions. Say more about how we protect people targeted by his lies, and say more about your prediction that someone will die.
Well, again, when you use language like treason, and I mean, go into my social media feeds, because I've been trying to tell the truth about this ever since Tulsi put out this staggeringly disprovable and instantly disprovable lie. When you start using the kind of language, the language of treason and of somebody being a traitor, some tiny percentage of the population is just crazy enough to decide that they need to do something about it. And again, it's what happened where I am standing right now on January 6, 2021. The statements of a president have some power. And by the way, 4 weeks from now, or 5 weeks from now, or 6 weeks from now, we all need to ask the question, and I will certainly ask the question, which is, okay, the former president is a traitor. Where is the Department of Justice indictment? Where is the prosecution of Barack Obama? But it will be Epstein all over again, because 4 or 5 weeks from now, there will, of course, be no prosecution of Barack Obama, because there's not a court in the land that would do anything other than laugh the DOJ and the prosecutors out of the room. But by then, we'll be on to the next bizarro conspiracy theory to try to distract from the fact that, no, they're not going to prosecute Barack Obama.
Let me show you. I mean, accusing someone of treason isn't new. Accusing a former President Obama, of treason is the twist. But here's a list of the people that Trump has smeared with accusations of treason. Former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mark Milley, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, former FBI agent Pete Strzok, former FBI agent Lisa Page, and Miles Taylor, one of your fellow panelists. I mean, what they all have in common is putting the Constitution and national security ahead of any sort of fealty to Donald Trump. Are you positive that Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice won't invert that sort of paradigm and put Donald Trump ahead of the Constitution and national security and indict somebody or charge somebody without evidence?
They might try. that would be a terrifically foolish move, because the one element of our national government which has not bent its knee to pledge total fealty to Donald Trump is the judiciary. And judge after judge after judge, including Trump-appointed judges, are standing up and saying, and actually laughing stuff out of court. You know, the trial yesterday around the attack on Harvard University, that judges are using language that is almost comically derisive of the Department of Justice and of this administration. So maybe Pam Bondi, in a desperate attempt to keep her job, does in fact try to prosecute Barack Obama or Jim Himes or Mark Milley. And, you know, the laughter from whatever court that case is brought into will be heard in 4 time zones.